The worst part about betrayal. It's not just that it comes from family, it's when your sister steals your wedding deposit, wears your dress, and marries your fiancé using your own money. I'm Ava, and the day I came home and smelled her perfume, I thought she stole everything. She didn't know I would steal it all back, plus everything she thought she won. I dropped my suitcase by the door, the wheels spinning slightly before stopping. My heels clicked against the hardwood floor as I moved through the living room, my eyes scanning for any sign that Brielle had been here. I didn't need to look hard. A half-empty coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter, the same brand she always carried in her tote. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm as I pulled out my phone, checking the notifications I missed during the last 3 days in Chicago. There it was. An email from the Maple Grand, the venue I had spent months dreaming about, the place Ethan and I were supposed to get married in just 4 weeks. I tapped the screen, my thumb trembling as the message opened. Your booking has been successfully transferred to Brielle Collins. I blinked, reading the words again, my breath catching in my throat. My sister's name. On my wedding venue, number. This had to be a mistake. I called Kara, pressing the phone to my ear as I paced the kitchen. She picked up on the second ring. Ava, oh God, I've been trying to reach you. Are you okay? What's going on, Kara? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Why is Brielle's name on my wedding venue? Kara went silent for a moment. I could hear her exhale, the shaky breath she always took when she was about to deliver bad news. Ava, you need to sit down. Just tell me. Brielle and Ethan. They got married 2 days ago. At the Maple Grand. The world seemed to tilt, the kitchen lights blurring as I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. That's not possible. I was just there planning everything. I was. My voice trailed off as I struggled to process the words. I saw it on Instagram. Kara continued, her voice soft. They posted pictures. Brielle was wearing a white dress. Ethan was. They looked. Don't I cut her off, squeezing my eyes shut. My mind was already filling in the details I didn't want to see. I pulled the phone away and opened Instagram with numb fingers. The app loaded slowly, like it knew I was about to witness the moment my life shattered. There it was. Brielle in my dress, the lace sleeves I had chosen so carefully hugging her arms, standing in front of the floral arch I had picked with Ethan. Her hair was curled softly around her face, her smile, wide eyes bright with happiness. Ethan stood beside her, his arm around her waist, his mouth pressed against her temple. They looked perfect. The caption under Brielle's post read, "Sometimes love can't wait." I let out a sound, a dry laugh that tasted like metal on my tongue. My hands shook as I scrolled through the photos, each one a stab in the chest. Brielle throwing her head back, laughing as Ethan lifted her off the ground. The ring on her finger, the same design Ethan and I had chosen together. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the floor as I sank down, pressing my back against the cabinets. I felt the cold of the tiles through my jeans, grounding me as my chest rose and fell in shallow, quick breaths. I pulled my knees up, hugging them to my chest, trying to quiet the noise in my head. The scent of vanilla was stronger here, clinging to the air, mixing with the faint hint of coffee. She had been here. Before leaving to marry the man I loved. She had stood in this kitchen, maybe laughed, maybe told herself that what she was about to do was right. My sister. My only sister. I leaned my head back, letting the tears fall silently as I stared at the ceiling. The image of Brielle in my dress burned into my mind. I don't know how long I sat there, but the cold from the floor was starting to seep into my bones when my phone buzzed beside me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and reached for it, half expecting it to be a message from Ethan explaining everything, telling me it was a mistake. It wasn't him. It was a photo from Kara, a screenshot from Brielle's Facebook page. It was the same picture I had just seen, but this time with comments flooding underneath. Friends congratulating them, people I knew from college liking the post, dropping heart emojis as if they weren't witnessing the theft of my entire future. I called Kara. She picked up on the first ring. Ava, oh God, are you okay? Is it true? My voice cracked, but I tried to keep it steady. Did they really get married? There was a pause, a painful silence that filled the space between us before she finally whispered, "Yes." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my free hand against my forehead. How long, Kara? How long has this been going on? I don't know everything she said, her voice shaking. But I saw them together a few weeks ago at a coffee shop. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding, that maybe Ethan was just comforting her or something. I let out a dry laugh, hollow and bitter. Comforting her. Right. Ava, I'm so sorry. I should have told you, but I didn't want to hurt you. Well, you failed. I snapped, the anger boiling over for a moment before guilt crashed over me. I'm sorry, I can't believe this. I know, Kara whispered. Do you want me to come over? I looked around my empty apartment, the apartment Ethan and I had picked together. Every corner felt like a lie now. Number, I need to be alone. Call me if you need anything, okay? I'm here. I know, I whispered before ending the call. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff, and walked toward the bedroom. I opened the closet expecting to see my wedding dress hanging there, but there was only empty space. I reached out, running my hand over the bare hanger, feeling the sharp edge dig into my palm. She took it. Brielle had come into my apartment, into my life, and taken everything that mattered to me. My dress, my venue, my fiancé. She had taken my future and made it hers. I walked back to the living room, each step feeling heavier than the last. I sat on the edge of the couch, pulling my laptop onto my knees. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I forced myself to open my email again, reading the message from the Maple Grand one more time. Your booking has been successfully transferred to Brielle Collins. $12,000. Money I had saved for years, working late nights, skipping vacations, all so I could have the wedding I had dreamed of since I was a girl. Gone. The notification bar on my laptop lit up with another message, this time from the Maple Grand's payment portal. Final payment received. Thank you for choosing us for your special day. My vision blurred, but I blinked the tears away. I clicked through the payment confirmation, scrolling down until I found the transaction details. Brielle had used my card to pay the final balance. A scream built in my chest, but it came out as a choked sob. I slammed the laptop shut, pushing it away as I buried my face in my hands. Minutes passed before I finally pulled myself together. I wiped my face again, forcing my breathing to slow as I stood and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face, watching the water drip down the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, swollen, and tired, but beneath the exhaustion was something else. Something sharp. I wasn't going to let this break me. I walked back to the living room, picking up my phone from the floor. I scrolled back to Brielle's post, looking at the comments again, reading every fake congratulation, every smiling emoji, every lie. My thumb hovered over the call button on Ethan's contact, but I pulled it back. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hearing me break. Instead, I opened a new message, typing slowly, each letter deliberate, each word heavy. Em đã cướp lễ cưới của chị Brielle, chị sẽ lấy lại tất cả. I hit send and watched the message deliver, the screen lighting up in the dark room. I set the phone down, the weight in my chest shifting, transforming into something cold and steady. She thought she had won. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment I had trusted Brielle, every promise Ethan had made, every plan I thought we were building together. By the time the sun rose over Boston, the exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus I hadn't felt in years. I sat up, grabbing my phone from the coffee table, and scrolled through my contacts until I found my mother's number. My thumb hovered over the call button for a moment before I pressed it, bringing the phone to my ear. She answered on the second ring. Ava. Is everything all right? I closed my eyes, forcing my voice to stay calm. Did you know, Mom, about Brielle and Ethan? There was a pause, a long breath on the other end of the line. Ava, I don't want to get in the middle of this. I felt my jaw clench. So you knew. I didn't know everything, she said quickly. Brielle came to me a week ago. She said she and Ethan had fallen in love, that you were too busy with work, that you didn't have time for him. My hand tightened around the phone. So you believed her? She's your sister, my mother snapped, her voice cold. And she deserves to be happy. You've spent your whole life chasing your career, Ava. Maybe it's time you let someone else have a chance. I pulled the phone away from my ear, staring at the screen as if it might crack under the heat building in my chest. When I put it back to my ear, my voice was flat. She used my money, my venue, my dress. And you think she deserves to be happy, Ava? I have to go, I said, ending the call before she could finish. I dropped the phone onto the couch, my hands shaking. I pressed my palms against my eyes, breathing in and out, fighting the sting in my chest. They were all on her side. No one was going to fight for me, so I would fight for myself. The door buzzer rang, cutting through the silence. I pushed myself off the couch and opened the door to Kara, standing there with 2 coffees in her hands, her eyes filled with worry. I brought fuel, she said softly, holding out a cup. I took it, stepping aside to let her in. Thanks. She set her bag down and looked at me. Your mom called me last night. Of course she did. I took a sip of the coffee, letting the heat burn my tongue. Let me guess. She wanted you to check on me, make sure I wasn't doing anything crazy. Kara's eyes softened. She's worried about you. I let out a humorless laugh. She wasn't worried when Brielle was stealing my wedding. Kara sat down on the arm of the chair, her hand resting on my shoulder. You don't have to handle this alone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I felt the tears threaten again. But I swallowed them down. I know, I said quietly. But I need to. She nodded, squeezing my shoulder before pulling back. Just promise me you'll think before you act. I didn't answer. I turned away, setting the coffee down as my phone buzzed again on the table. I picked it up, expecting another message from Brielle or Ethan, but it wasn't. It was Jack Foster. I answered, forcing my voice to stay steady. Jack. Ava, he said, his voice deep and calm the way it always was. I just got off a call you're going to want to know about. I turned, meeting Kara's eyes as she watched me carefully. What is it? Ward Holdings, Jack said. They're in trouble. Ethan's been trying to cover it up, but the company's bleeding cash. They're sitting on a mountain of debt, and the board is getting nervous. I felt a slow, cold smile tug at the corner of my mouth. How bad? Bad, Jack confirmed. And Ethan's been pushing for a quick cash injection, trying to keep the family business afloat. He's desperate, Ava. Desperate. The word settled in my chest, igniting something deep within me. I see, I said softly. Thank you, Jack. Ava, I know you're hurting, but be careful, he said. This is business, not personal. I ended the call, lowering the phone as I turned to look at Kara. She was studying me, her eyes wide, waiting for me to speak. What is it? She asked. I took a deep breath, the weight in my chest shifting, sharpening. Ethan is desperate, I said quietly. And I think it's time he learned what happens when he takes something that doesn't belong to him. Kara stared at me, her coffee halfway to her lips, her eyes narrowing as she tried to read my face. Ava, what does that mean? She asked, setting the cup down carefully. It means, I said, my voice calm as I moved to the table, that Ethan thought he could steal my life and walk away. I opened my laptop, the screen lighting up the dim room, the quiet hum filling the silence. My fingers moved quickly, pulling up a search bar. Kara stepped closer, her arms crossed. Please tell me you're not planning something crazy. I ignored her, typing Ward Holdings Boston into the search. Their official website popped up, filled with carefully curated images of Ethan's family smiling at charity events, cutting ribbons at grand openings, shaking hands with politicians. They looked untouchable. But Jack's words echoed in my head. They were not. I scrolled down to the investor section, clicking through to the shareholder reports. It was locked behind a portal, but I didn't need access to know what I was looking for. Kara let out a shaky breath. Ava, just think about this. I glanced at her. I have thought about this. All night. You're talking about getting involved with Ethan's family business. This isn't you. I let out a small, humorless laugh. You're right, it wasn't me. The old me would have cried, would have let them walk away with everything I built, everything I planned, but I'm done being that woman. Kara sat down across from me, her eyes softening. And what exactly are you planning? I took a deep breath, the plan forming in my mind, solid and sharp. If Ward Holdings is bleeding cash, Ethan is going to be looking for investors, for anyone to save him, and he won't be looking too closely at who is buying. You want to buy into Ward Holdings, she whispered. I want to own it, I said simply. Kara shook her head. Ava, that's insane. No, I said, my voice quiet even. What's insane is thinking you can steal from me, humiliate me, and expect me to just move on. My phone buzzed again on the table and I glanced down to see Jack's name flashing across the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker. Ava, I have numbers for you, Jack said, immediately, his tone all business. Ward Holdings is over-leveraged. Ethan has been using short-term loans to pay long-term debts, and now the board is pressuring him to find a solution. How much would it take to get a controlling interest? I asked. Jack paused for a moment. Given the state they're in, not as much as you'd think. If we move fast and buy through different channels, we can do it without raising alarms. Kara's eyes widened, but she stayed silent, listening. I want you to start, I said, my hand tightening around the phone. Set up the shell companies, use the capital from the fund I set up for expansion. No one will trace it back to me. Jack let out a low whistle. You're serious. I'm done letting people take what's mine. I said, my voice firm. Jack's voice softened just slightly. You're playing with fire, Ava. I know, I replied. But Ethan started this. I'm just finishing it. All right, Jack said. I'll get the paperwork started today. We'll move quietly. Thank you, I said, ending the call. The room fell silent again, the weight of what I had just set in motion pressing down on me, but instead of fear there was only a cold certainty. Kara shook her head, her eyes glistening. You're really going to do this? I met her gaze. I don't have a choice. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She just stood and walked over, pulling me into a tight hug. You're not alone, okay? She whispered. I hugged her back for a moment before pulling away, looking back at the glowing screen. I placed my fingers on the keyboard, typed slowly, each letter steady, deliberate. Ward Holdings. Ownership. Acquisition. The cursor blinked, waiting as the plan settled in my mind, solid as steel. They thought they broke me. But I was just getting started. I wasn't the abandoned bride anymore. I was the hunter, and this was my hunt. I spent the next morning sitting at my kitchen table, my laptop open, papers scattered around me, the sunlight cutting through the blinds in sharp lines. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I didn't care. Every second counted. Jack called, his voice low, calm, the way it always was when he was working a deal. We've set up 4 shell companies, he said. They'll start buying up shares today, small amounts, nothing that will draw attention. I pulled the laptop closer, checking the accounts, watching the numbers shift. Good. You sure about this, Ava? Jack asked, and for a moment I could hear the concern beneath his professional tone. I glanced around my apartment at the empty space where my wedding dress used to hang, at the photos of Ethan and me I had thrown into a box by the door. I've never been more sure about anything, I said. Jack let out a breath. All right. We'll move fast. The call ended and I sat back for a moment, letting the weight of what I was doing sink in. But there was no fear. Just a quiet, cold certainty. Ethan was busy, too busy to notice. He was posting smiling photos from the beach, Brielle beside him, her hand on his chest, her ring glittering in the sun. Their captions were full of hearts and empty promises, and I knew the truth. Behind those smiles, Ethan was drowning in debt, scrambling to keep his family's company alive while pretending everything was perfect. He didn't see me coming. I kept working, moving money, signing documents. Jack sent over each signature a promise to myself that I would not let them win. The shares came in slowly, unnoticed, hidden behind layers of names and quiet transactions. Late that afternoon, I got a text from Jack. I let out a breath. I didn't realize I had been holding my fingers tapping against the table as I stared at the screen. 20% was a start. I closed my laptop, standing to stretch my body, aching from sitting too long. I walked to the window, looking out at the city below, the traffic, moving people living their lives, unaware of the war I was waging from my kitchen. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jack. Brielle has accounts receiving payments from Ward Holdings. Looks like Ethan is funneling money to her under the radar. I froze, reading the words again, the anger building in my chest. Of course he was. Ethan wasn't just using her to hurt me, he was using her to hide his mess. I sat back down, pulling my laptop closed, searching through the public records, the small payments, the patterns that Jack had flagged. The accounts were in Brielle's name, but the transfers came directly from Ward Holdings, labeled as consulting fees and investment distributions. She had no idea she was being used. I leaned back, rubbing my temples, letting the anger settle into resolve. If Ethan wanted to play dirty, I would play smarter. I opened a new message, typing slowly, each word deliberate, each letter a promise. Thank you for giving up the wedding venue, Brielle. I hit send, watching the message deliver, knowing it would shake her, knowing it would remind her exactly who she had crossed. I set the phone down, the glow of the screen, fading, the quiet of the apartment pressing in around me as I closed my eyes, breathing out slowly. The hunt had begun, and I wasn't going to stop until everything Ethan tried to steal from me was mine again. I glanced at the clock on the oven, the minutes crawling past as the city outside shifted from the soft glow of afternoon to the cold silver of evening. My laptop hummed quietly, the screen filled with transaction confirmations, stock purchase agreements, and encrypted messages from Jack. Each click of the mouse felt like a drumbeat in my chest. I opened the secure chat Jack had set up, watching as new documents uploaded in real time. The latest update showed we had crossed 27%, inching closer to the tipping point where I could force Ethan's hand. Good progress, Jack had typed earlier. Ward Holdings CFO just filed a request for emergency funding approval. They're getting desperate. I traced the edge of my coffee cup with my finger, the ceramic cool against my skin. Ethan was probably too busy posing for staged honeymoon pictures with Brielle, posting smiling photos with captions about love and forever, while the ground beneath him cracked wider with every dollar he spent that wasn't his. A notification pinged. Payment confirmation, Jack messaged. 3% more locked. 30%. I exhaled, letting the air leave my lungs slowly as the number settled in my mind. The more I took, the closer I came to the moment I could walk into a boardroom and watch Ethan's smile shatter. I scrolled through the payment receipts, each one tied to the shell companies Jack had organized. The addresses were scattered across Massachusetts, Delaware, Nevada, each company nothing more than a quiet paper trail that led back to me. The laptop chimed again, and I clicked the notification. Jack had sent over screenshots showing small regular payments from Ward Holdings to an account under Brielle's name. The memo lines read, Consulting Advisory Personal Development. Lies. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, remembering the moments Brielle had sat across from me at brunch, pretending to care about wedding colors, about floral arrangements, asking questions with wide, innocent eyes while Ethan's hand rested on her thigh under the table. My phone buzzed against the table, jolting me from the memory. Brielle. Can we talk tonight? I stared at the message, the glow of the screen harsh in the dim kitchen. Another message popped up before I could respond. Please, Ava. I just need to explain. Explain. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. 7 p.m. Moms. I hit send, setting the phone down as I pushed away from the table. I moved through the apartment, my eyes catching on the empty spaces where Ethan's things had once been, the framed photos turned down, the wedding planning book stacked neatly in a box near the door. I pulled my hair back, tying it with a band, catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror near the hallway. I didn't look like the woman who had once tried on white dresses with hope in her heart. I looked like someone who was done being hurt. My phone buzzed again. Thank you. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned back to the laptop, opening the secure document Jack had sent earlier. It was a draft letter to Ward Holdings Board, a request for a financial audit under shareholder rights. My finger hovered over the file before I closed it. Not yet. I needed a few more days, a few more quiet transactions while Ethan remained blind in his honeymoon haze. The cursor blinked on the screen, patient waiting. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with another message from Brielle. Tonight, right, please. I picked up the phone, staring at her words, hearing her voice in my mind, remembering how she used to run to me when she was scared, how I would promise her that I would protect her no matter what. I set the phone down, walking to the window, looking out at the streetlights flickering on below, the world moving forward, while I stood perfectly still on the edge of everything about to change. Tonight she would sit across from me, looking for forgiveness. She wouldn't find it. The hunt was still on, and I was just getting started. I didn't knock when I walked into my mother's house that evening. The door was unlocked, just like it always was, and the smell of lavender and old wood hit me as I stepped inside. Brielle was already sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She looked up, her eyes, red makeup smudged at the corners the way it always did when she cried. I stayed standing, letting the silence stretch, letting her feel it. "Ava," she started, her voice small, breaking. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. She swallowed, setting the mug down with shaking hands. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "Really?" I said, my voice calm, flat. "Because it sure looked like you did." She flinched, her shoulders curling in on themselves. "Ethan said you were too busy, that you didn't love him anymore, that you—" "Stop." I cut her off, stepping forward. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she wiped them away quickly. "I didn't know about the money, about the venue deposit. I thought he was handling it." I let out a humorless laugh. "You wore my dress, Brielle." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lower lip trembled before she bit down on it. I sat down across from her, folding my hands on the table. "What do you want from me?" She shook her head. "I don't know, I wanted to explain." "You wanted to ease your guilt," I corrected. She didn't deny it. I leaned back, studying her, the sister I used to protect, the sister I used to defend against every bully, every broken heart, every failure she created for herself. "You chose him," I said quietly. "You chose to betray me." She wiped her eyes again, nodding as a sob escaped. "I know." For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the photos, the dress, the stolen venue, the money pulled from my account while she smiled at me, pretending to be the little sister who needed me. I stood, pushing the chair back, the legs scraping against the floor. "We're done here." She looked up, panic flashing across her face. "Ava, please, don't," I said, shaking my head. "You made your choice." I turned, walking toward the door, but her voice stopped me. "Are you going to ruin him?" I paused, my hand on the doorknob, turning back to meet her eyes. "Yes," I said. She pressed her hands to her mouth, shaking, but I didn't care. I opened the door and stepped outside, the cold night air hitting my skin as I closed it behind me. I didn't look back. My phone buzzed as I reached my car, the screen lighting up with Jack's name. 42%, he said as soon as I answered. I let out a slow breath, leaning against the car, staring up at the dark sky. "Good," I said, a small smile touching my lips. "Let me know when we hit 50. Jack chuckled softly. "You'll be the first to know." I ended the call, slipping the phone into my pocket, feeling the weight of the night pressing down around me. I opened the car door, sliding into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel as I let the engine rumble to life. They thought they could take everything from me and walk away. They were wrong. I drove through the quiet streets, the lights of Boston blurring past as I pressed my foot on the gas, feeling the vibration through the wheel. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, Jack's name lighting up again. "Le Papillon," he said without greeting. "They're there, the whole family." I smirked, taking the next turn. "Good." I parked across the street, the glow of Le Papillon's gold lettering reflecting off the windows. I reached into the back seat, pulling out the red dress I had chosen for tonight. I changed in the car, smoothing the fabric down, adjusting the neckline, checking my reflection in the mirror. Not a victim. Not tonight. I stepped out, the heels clicking against the pavement as I crossed the street, the cold air brushing against my skin. The maitre d' looked up as I entered, his eyes widening for a moment before he forced a smile. "Reservation?" he asked. "Table for one," I replied, my voice calm. His eyes darted toward the back of the restaurant, where the soft glow of candles lit a long table surrounded by laughter and clinking glasses. I followed his gaze, seeing Ethan's profile, his arm draped across Brielle's chair, her laugh too bright, too forced. "This way," the maitre d' said, leading me across the floor. The restaurant fell silent as I passed, conversations pausing, eyes following me as I walked, the red dress demanding attention I didn't shy away from. I stopped beside their table, meeting Brielle's eyes first. Her smile faltered, her face draining of color as she gripped the stem of her wine glass. Ethan turned, his expression freezing, the fake smile dropping as he saw me. His jaw clenched and his arm fell from Brielle's chair. "Ava," he managed, his voice strained. I tilted my head, letting a small cold smile touch my lips. "Ethan." "Brielle." They said nothing, the silence stretching as the others at the table shifted uncomfortably. Your table, Miss, the maitre d' interrupted softly. I turned to him. Actually, I'll sit here. I pulled a chair from the neighboring table, dragging it close enough that I could feel Brielle's trembling from across the small space. I sat down, crossing my legs, letting the red fabric fall around me like a quiet warning. Congratulations on the wedding, I said, reaching for the wine list. No one spoke. A waiter appeared, pouring me a glass without asking. I lifted it, swirling the wine as I studied Brielle's pale face. Oh, and about that $12,000 deposit you used for your venue. I continued, taking a slow sip, letting the silence tighten around us. Do you plan on paying that back, or shall I consider it a wedding gift? Brielle's hand slipped, glass tipping, wine spilling across the white tablecloth. She scrambled, grabbing a napkin, her breathing ragged as she tried to blot the stain. Ethan's face was stone, his eyes hard as he looked at me. This isn't the time or place, Ava. Oh, I think it's perfect, I replied lightly, resting my chin in my hand as I watched them. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his face shifting, eyes flickering with something close to fear before he quickly turned the screen away. I saw enough. Jack's message. I took another sip of wine, letting it linger on my tongue before swallowing. Trouble at work. Ethan's jaw tightened. Don't. Brielle looked between us, confusion and panic crossing her face. What's going on, Ethan? He ignored her, his eyes locked on mine. You need to leave. I leaned back, a small laugh escaping. Oh, Ethan. I'm not going anywhere. My phone buzzed in my purse, and I pulled it out, reading Jack's message. 42% secured. I lifted my glass in a toast, my eyes never leaving Ethan's. To new beginnings, I said softly. He stood abruptly, stepping away from the table, his hand gripping his phone as he moved toward the patio, his shoulders tense. Brielle's eyes filled with tears, her lip trembling. Ava, please, what is happening? I set my glass down carefully, leaning forward so only she could hear. You chose him, I whispered. Now you live with it. She covered her mouth, shaking her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. I leaned back, brushing a strand of hair from my face, my eyes following Ethan as he stood outside, pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. I reached for my glass again, lifting it slowly, letting the candlelight catch the deep red of the wine. Get ready, I whispered, watching him through the glass. Next week will be your nightmare. When you realize your sister has been betrayed by the same man who betrayed you, hatred shifts into cold contempt. I left Le Papillon without looking back, the cold air hitting my skin as I walked to my car, the heels of my shoes cracking against the pavement. I let the silence of the drive clear my mind, the city lights flashing past as I planned the next move. The next morning, I found Colin waiting near the lobby of my office building, his dark hair messy, his tie loosened like he hadn't slept. His eyes were sharp, holding that restless energy only a reporter who smelled blood carried. Ava Collins. He asked, his voice steady but low. Yes, I replied, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. I'm Colin Hayes, Boston Financial Times, he said, flashing his badge before slipping it back into his pocket. I think we need to talk about Ethan Ward. I studied him for a moment, then tilted my head toward the cafe across the street. 10 minutes. Inside, he set his recorder on the table, but I reached over and turned it off. Off the record, I said. He hesitated, then nodded, pulling a manila folder from his satchel and sliding it across the table to me. I opened it, scanning the printed statements, the transaction IDs, the list of payments, Ethan's name. Ward Holdings. Transfers labeled employee fund disbursements, amounts that added up to millions. 3 million, to be exact. Company funds, Colin said, tapping the page. Filtered into accounts under your sister's name. My eyes flicked up to meet his. Brielle. He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. She's listed as the primary on the accounts. Ethan's been hiding behind her, using her name to launder the money. If this breaks, she'll be the one the SEC goes after first. I closed the folder, my hands steady. Why come to me? Because I know what he did to you, he said simply. And because I don't like watching him ruin another woman's life. I leaned back, studying him. Another woman, Colin exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Rachel Turner. A teacher from Vermont. He dated her, convinced her to co-sign on a business loan, drained her savings, then disappeared. Left her in debt while he moved on to the next target. Rachel. Another victim. I let the silence stretch the weight of everything pressing against my ribs. Brielle wasn't just foolish, she was another piece on Ethan's board, a pawn he used while she smiled in her wedding dress. But she still chose him over me. I closed the folder, sliding it back to Colin. I need copies of everything. He pulled out a flash drive, placing it on the table. Already prepared. I slipped it into my purse, standing up. You'll get your story, Colin, just not yet. He nodded, his eyes following me as I left the cafe, the cold air biting at my face as I stepped back into the street. In my car, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, watching the files load, the evidence clear and cold in black and white. Payments. Names. Dates. The silent testimony of betrayal and greed. I could feel anger rising again, but it wasn't hot this time. It was clean, cold, purposeful. I opened my phone, scrolling through the messages from Brielle, her desperate attempts to reach out, the empty apologies, the pleas for me to listen. She didn't know she was drowning. I typed a new message, my fingers moving steadily, each word. Final, want out, meet me. 8 p.m. Tonight. I hit send, watching the message deliver before locking the screen and setting the phone on the seat beside me. It was time to end this. And it would start tonight. I parked in the back corner of the cafe lot, watching the rain smear across the windshield, the wipers squeaking as they cleared the view. The neon sign buzzed softly, flickering against the puddles outside. My phone buzzed. I'll be there, Brielle had texted, her words clipped, scared. Good. I shut off the engine, slipping the flash drive Colin had given me into my coat pocket, feeling its weight against my chest as I stepped out into the rain. Inside, the cafe was nearly empty, the warm scent of coffee clashing with the cold, wet air still clinging to me. I chose a booth in the corner, facing the door, pulling the hood of my coat down and letting my hair fall around my shoulders. Brielle arrived 10 minutes later, wrapped in a beige coat, her hair damp, her eyes wide as they scanned the room before landing on me. She hesitated, then made her way over, sitting across from me with trembling hands. Ava, she started, her voice breaking. I held up a hand, stopping her. Don't. We're past that. She swallowed, pulling at the cuff of her sleeve. Why am I here? I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, placing it on the table between us. You're in trouble, Brielle. Her brows pulled together, confusion mixing with fear. What is that? Proof, I said, quietly leaning forward. Ethan has been funneling stolen company funds into accounts under your name. She blinked, shaking her head. Number. No, that's not possible. Ethan said a lot of things, I interrupted. He used you, Brielle. Just like he used me. Her lip trembled, tears pooling in her eyes. I didn't know, Ava. I swear I didn't know. My jaw tightened, the anger threatening to rise again, but I forced it down, focusing on the cold, clear truth. It doesn't matter if you knew, I said, my voice firm. Your name is on those accounts. If this goes public, you will be the one they come after. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shaking her head as tears slipped down her cheeks. Oh God. What do? I leaned back, studying her as she broke in front of me, the sister who once wore my dress, and smiled as she stole my future, now realizing the future she chose was a lie. You help me, I said finally. You help me take him down. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. I can't. He'll know. He'll, Brielle. I snapped, leaning forward again, my voice low and cold. You don't have a choice. You can either help me expose him or you can go down with him. She shook her hands, gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. What do you want me to do? I exhaled, letting the moment settle before I spoke. Ward Holdings is hosting their gala next week. Ethan will be there, the board, the investors, the press. I need you to give me access to the accounts, the emails, everything he's sent you. We expose him publicly, cleanly, with proof. Her eyes darted away, guilt flashing across her face. They'll hate me. They already do, I said softly. She looked back at me, tears still falling, but there was something else in her eyes now. Fear, yes, but also a spark of the sister I used to know. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll help you. I nodded once, pushing the flash drive toward her. Don't let him see this. We'll meet again tomorrow. I'll tell you exactly what to do." She reached for it with shaking hands, clutching it like it was the last piece of hope she had left. She stood pausing as she looked down at me. "Ava," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't respond." She turned and left the bell above the door ringing softly as she stepped out into the rain. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the noise of the cafe fade, the plan locking into place in my mind. This was it. The final move was coming. Brielle showed up late, her hair damp from the drizzle, her face pale and streaked with tears as she slid into the booth across from me. She couldn't meet my eyes. I pushed the coffee I ordered for her across the table, the steam curling into the air between us. She wrapped her hands around the cup, but didn't drink. "Ava," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know what to do." I studied her, letting the silence tighten until she squirmed, her fingers trembling against the cup. "You're going to tell me everything," I said quietly. She flinched, her shoulders curling inward as her eyes finally lifted to meet mine, glassy and terrified. I didn't know. She started shaking her head. "Ethan told me it was for us, for our future, that it was just investments." I pulled out the printed transaction records, laying them on the table one by one, each line highlighted, each number, screaming the truth. $3 million. Ward Holdings, Brielle's name. She stared at them, her lip trembling, tears sliding down her cheeks as she reached for one page with shaking hands. "He said it was just paperwork," she sobbed. "He said he needed me to sign because it was easier, that it was all legal." "Did you even read them?" I asked, my voice low, cold. She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head, the tears falling faster. "I trusted him." I let the moment hang there, watching her break piece by piece the truth she had been hiding from herself, tearing her apart in front of me. "You slept with him while he was with me," I said, my voice flat. She sobbed harder, pressing her hand to her mouth as her shoulders shook. "I'm sorry, Ava. I'm so sorry." I pulled out the small recorder from my coat pocket, setting it on the table and pressing record, the red light blinking quietly. "Say it," I ordered. Her eyes widened, but I didn't look away. "Say what you did." She sobbed again, her breath catching, before she finally spoke, her voice a broken whisper. "I changed the name on your venue deposit. I took your dress. I slept with Ethan while he was with you. I signed the papers he gave me. I didn't know it was stolen money. I didn't know." The words spilled out, each one another nail in the coffin she had built for herself. I leaned back, letting her words settle into the recorder, the truth filling the silence between us. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, breathing hard, her eyes begging for something I wasn't going to give. "Are you ready to help me?" I asked. She looked away, her gaze dropping to the papers scattered on the table, her fingers tracing the lines, the numbers, the evidence of her betrayal. "If you don't help me," I said, my voice soft but sharp, "you're going down with him." She let out a broken sob, pressing her palm to her forehead, shaking her head before she finally nodded. "What do you need me to do?" she whispered. I reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "You're going to be my witness at the gala," I said. "You're going to tell the board, the press, everyone exactly what Ethan has done." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down again as she nodded, her shoulders sagging with the weight of her choice. "Okay," she whispered. I picked up the recorder, shutting it off, the red light blinking out as I slipped it back into my pocket. Brielle stayed there, her hands still wrapped around the coffee she never drank, her eyes vacant, broken. I stood, slipping the papers back into my bag, looking down at her one last time before turning to leave. As I stepped into the cold night, I pulled out my phone, typing a message quickly before slipping it back into my pocket. "Get your camera ready. Tomorrow night, Ethan Falls." I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, letting the cold seep into my skin, grounding me. The neon lights of the cafe flickered above, reflecting off the wet pavement as cars passed, their tires hissing in the rain. My heart was calm. I walked to my car, each step steady, each breath controlled. When I reached the door, I paused, glancing back at the window where Brielle had sat moments ago, her face pale, streaked with tears, her hands shaking as she confessed everything. She would never be the same again. Neither would I. I drove through the south end, the road slick and quiet, the wipers thumping a slow rhythm as I planned the final details in my head. Tomorrow was the gala. Tomorrow was the moment everything would break open. I parked outside my building, taking the stairs up instead of the elevator, each step deliberate, each second, a reminder that this was my choice. I unlocked the door, stepping into the silence of my apartment. I placed the recorder on the kitchen counter, staring at it as if it might speak, the weight of Brielle's confession still heavy in the room. Her voice had been small, broken. I took your venue. I wore your dress. I slept with Ethan. I signed everything. I pulled my laptop closer, connecting the recorder, watching the files upload, the progress bar inching forward with agonizing slowness. When it finished, I played it back, her voice filling the quiet, raw and trembling. I sent the file to Jack first, then to Colin, then to my lawyer. Each click was a promise. Each transfer was a nail in Ethan's coffin. My phone buzzed, Jack's message lighting up the screen. It's done. Another buzz, this time from Colin. We're ready. I closed my laptop, leaning back in the chair, letting my eyes close for a moment as I breathed in, then out, steady, even. I stood, moving to my bedroom, opening the closet, pushing aside the empty hangers until my hand found the red dress. I pulled it out, letting the fabric fall, the color deep, demanding. Tomorrow I would wear it again. Tomorrow, the girl who once dreamed of walking down the aisle would walk into a battlefield instead. I laid the dress on the bed, turning to the mirror, studying the reflection, staring back at me. The woman looking back was calm, her eyes sharp, her shoulders squared. She was ready. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolling through the messages, stopping at Brielle's last one. I'm scared. I typed a reply, pausing before hitting send. Be ready. I slipped the phone onto the nightstand, turning off the light, letting the room fill with shadows. The city lights outside flickered across the ceiling, dancing in patterns as I lay back, staring up, letting the silence wrap around me. Tomorrow, Ethan would face every lie he ever told. Tomorrow, Brielle would learn what it meant to choose survival over fear. Tomorrow, I would take back everything they stole from me. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness settle as my mind played through the plan, each step clear, each move precise. Tomorrow was the end of Ethan's story. And the beginning of mine. I zipped up the red dress, smoothing it over my hips, letting the fabric settle around me like armor. The mirror reflected a woman I almost didn't recognize, one who was done hiding, done begging. My phone buzzed. We're outside, Colin's text read. I grabbed my clutch, sliding the recorder inside, taking one last look around the apartment before shutting off the light. The air outside was sharp, the city humming with Friday night energy as I stepped into the waiting car. Colin sat in the back, adjusting his camera, while Jack was in the front, tapping something into his phone. You ready? Colin asked, looking up. I met his gaze in the mirror. I've been ready. The ride to the venue was quiet, the tension electric, the lights of the city streaking past the windows. Leighton Hotel's grand ballroom was already lit up, black cars pulling up, guests in gowns and tuxedos stepping out, laughter and camera flashes greeting them. We pulled up, the valet opening my door as I stepped onto the carpet, the red dress flowing around my legs as I walked. I could feel eyes turning, whispers following me as I entered the lobby, the crystal chandeliers casting reflections across the marble floors. Inside the ballroom, Ethan was already on stage, his smile wide, confident, his arm around Brielle as photographers snapped photos. She looked pale under the lights, her eyes darting through the crowd, searching for me. She found me. Her eyes widened, her lips parting, but she didn't move. Jack stepped up beside me, whispering, All files are ready. Signal when you want them on screen. I nodded once, scanning the crowd. Investors, board members, press, all gathered for Ethan's show. It was time to end it. Ethan stepped up to the microphone, his voice ringing out, practiced and smooth. Tonight we celebrate a new era for Ward Holdings, he said, smiling as he spread his arms. Applause followed, but I didn't clap. He kept talking about growth, about future plans, about the company's legacy. Then I stepped forward, my heels clicking on the polished floor, the microphone within reach as I moved to the center of the stage. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the applause. The room fell silent, heads turning, eyes widening as I reached for the microphone. Ethan's smile froze, confusion flickering across his face. Ava, what are you? I am Ava Collins, I said, my voice steady. And as of today, I am the controlling shareholder of Ward Holdings. Gasps rippled through the crowd, cameras flashing as reporters leaned forward. Ethan's face drained of color. You're lying. I turned toward Jack, giving him a small nod. The screens behind us lit up, images flashing, bank statements, transactions, emails, Ethan's signature, Brielle's name on account after account, the stolen funds mapped out in cold, brutal clarity. The final slide was a video, Brielle's confession, her voice shaking but clear, the truth echoing through the ballroom. Ethan lunged for the microphone. This is a setup. The doors opened and uniformed officers stepped in, moving toward the stage, their presence shifting the energy in the room from shock to chaos. Brielle was crying now, her hands covering her mouth as she backed away, tears streaking her makeup. Ethan spun toward her. You did this, you enough, I said again, stepping between them. He glared at me, eyes wild, sweat beading on his forehead as the officers grabbed his arms. You think you've won, he shouted, struggling against them. You think this is over, I met his gaze, unflinching. It's over, I said, calmly. They snapped the cuffs around his wrists, the metallic click, final sharp echoing in the silence before the reporters erupted with questions, cameras flashing like lightning. Ethan's eyes locked on mine, burning with hatred as they dragged him through the crowd. I turned toward Brielle, who sank to the floor crying as she buried her face in her hands. I knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It's done, I whispered. She looked up at me, her eyes red, her breath shaking, but there was something else there too. Relief. I stood smoothing the red dress, letting the fabric settle as I looked around the ballroom. The room buzzed with whispers, reporters leaning over, barriers, flashes still sparking as officers led Ethan toward the exit. His eyes stayed on me, hate burning, his mouth twisting as he shouted over the noise. You think this makes you better, Ava? You think you're clean? I tilted my head, letting a cold smile touch my lips. I'm not you, Ethan. He tried to lunge, the officers tightening their grip, dragging him backward as his shouts echoed. This isn't over. The doors closed behind him, the noise outside muffled, leaving a heavy silence in the ballroom. Brielle was still on the floor, shaking, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. I reached for a napkin, handing it to her. She took it with trembling hands, dabbing at her face as she tried to catch her breath. He's gone, I said, softly, kneeling so we were eye to eye. Her lips parted, a sob catching in her throat before she nodded, tears spilling again as she pressed the napkin to her mouth. Thank you, she whispered, her voice so small I almost missed it. I stood, helping her up, steadying her as she swayed in her heels. She clung to my arm for a moment before letting go, wiping her face as she looked around at the people staring, the flashes still coming. Come on, I said, guiding her toward the side of the stage away from the cameras. Jack approached, his phone in hand, his eyes scanning the room before settling on me. Press wants a statement. I glanced toward the screen still frozen on Ethan's accounts, the damning proof of everything he had stolen, everything he had destroyed. I stepped back onto the stage, the microphone still lived, the lights bright on my face. The room hushed, every camera turning toward me, the moment hanging like a thread. I am Ava Collins. I began, my voice calm, clear. Today Ward Holdings begins a new chapter. One built on transparency, accountability, and integrity. I paused, letting the words sink in. For those who were betrayed by the man you trusted to lead, you know this, you will be made whole. For those who supported him, blinded by promises and false smiles, let this be your reminder that no one is untouchable. Reporters shouted questions, their voices overlapping, but I stepped back, letting Jack take the microphone, his practiced voice handling the chaos as I moved away from the lights. Brielle stood near the back, her arms wrapped around herself, eyes still wet. I walked to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. It's over, I said. She looked at me, her eyes filled with something like hope, her shoulders dropping as she let out a shaky breath. Is it really? She asked. I glanced back at the stage, at the flashing cameras, the board members gathering, the staff whispering, the investors shifting with uncertainty. For him, yes, I replied. A waiter passed holding a tray of champagne. I took a glass, the bubbles rising as I lifted it to my lips. Across the room, the screens flickered off, leaving the ballroom in a hush as the reality of what had happened settled into every corner. I sipped the champagne, letting the taste linger before swallowing. The future you thought you stole, Ethan. I took it back. I set the empty glass on the tray of a passing waiter, stepping away from the chaos that still buzzed behind me. The flashes of cameras, the hum of whispered questions, the board members murmuring in corners as they absorbed the truth. I left it all as I walked through the marble hallway toward the exit. The cold air outside bit at my skin, but I welcomed it, letting it clear the last of the tension from my shoulders. I lifted my chin, inhaling the night air, tasting the freedom I had fought to reclaim. I didn't look back. The following morning, I stepped into the Ward Holdings building through the front doors, my heels striking the floor in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Employees paused as I passed, some offering hesitant smiles, others avoiding eye contact, uncertain of the change that was coming. They would learn soon enough that I wasn't here to destroy what was left. I was here to rebuild. I took the elevator to the top floor, the doors opening to the executive level, the place where Ethan once stood, making empty promises and backroom deals while people's futures hung in the balance. I unlocked the office, my office now, and stepped inside. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching on the sleek glass table where piles of paperwork waited for me. I shrugged off my coat, hanging it neatly before taking my seat. A single folder sat in the center of the desk marked Employee Restitution Fund. I flipped it open, scanning the signatures, the names of people Ethan had lied to, stolen from, ruined. Each name was a promise I was keeping. I signed the authorization, closing the folder gently. A knock came at the door. "Come in." Brielle stepped in, her hair tied back in a low ponytail, her face pale but determined. She clutched a stack of files to her chest, her eyes darting around the office before meeting mine. "They're ready for processing," she said, her voice low. I nodded, gesturing for her to place them on the desk. She did, carefully aligning the edges before stepping back, wringing her hands together. "How are you handling the calls?" I asked. She swallowed, her eyes flickering. "Some of them yell, some cry. Some thank me. I'm trying." I studied her for a moment, the sister who once wore my dress, who stood beside Ethan as he destroyed lives, who now stood here, trying to make it right in the only way she could. "You're doing the work," I said simply. She nodded, blinking rapidly before she turned to leave. "Brielle." She paused. "You're not doing this for me. You're doing it for them. Remember that." She pressed her lips together, nodding before stepping out, closing the door softly behind her. I leaned back in the chair, letting the quiet settle. The city moved outside, alive, uncaring, full of people who would never know the battle that had been fought in the boardrooms and courtrooms of this building. But I knew, and that was enough. The phone on my desk buzzed. Ethan Ward was sentenced to 15 years, Jack's message read. "It's done." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The weight of it wasn't joy or even satisfaction. It was peace. A buzz followed another message, lighting up my screen. "Dinner tonight, you owe me a drink." Colin's name flashed, the memory of his steady presence during the storm pulling a small smile from me. I typed back quickly. 7 p.m. "Don't be late." I set the phone down, turning my gaze toward the skyline, the light shifting across the glass as the day moved forward. I once thought the future was a wedding in white, a shared last name, a perfect life crafted in soft colors and laughter. I learned that the future is what you take back for yourself. And no one would ever steal mine again. I checked the time, closing the final file on my desk, the soft click of the folder echoing in the quiet office. Outside the glass windows, the city lights began to blink on one by one as dusk settled over Boston. A knock came at the door, light hesitant. "Come in," I called, leaning back. Brielle stepped inside, holding a stack of documents, her hair pulled back, the dark circles under her eyes, proof she was working, really working. She set the papers down, keeping her hands on them for a moment before looking up. "All the restitution checks for this week are processed," she said, her voice steady if quiet. "Good." I replied, nodding once. She didn't move, her hands flexing against the edges of the folder, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I'm trying, Ava." I watched her, letting the silence settle until she lifted her gaze, her eyes damp but clear. "I know," I said. "And you'll keep trying." She nodded, swallowing hard before turning to leave. At the door, she paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Thank you for letting me fix what I can." I held her gaze. "Just keep going." The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone in the office again, the hum of the city below like a heartbeat under the glass floor. I stood walking to the window, pressing my hand against the cool pane as I looked down at the streets I once crossed with Ethan's hand in mine, with dreams I thought were real. Dreams he tried to take. Dreams I reclaimed piece by piece. My phone buzzed on the desk, a message lighting up the screen. Dinner, don't make me sit alone. Colin. I let out a breath, a smile pulling at my lips as I grabbed my coat, shrugging it over my shoulders before flicking off the light and closing the door to my office behind me. The restaurant was warm, the smell of roasted garlic and wine drifting through the air as I stepped inside. Colin was already at a small table by the window, a glass of water in front of him, his jacket draped over the back of his chair. When he saw me, he stood smiling, something in his eyes softening, that knot in my chest that I hadn't realized was still there. You made it, he said, his voice low, steady. I did, I replied, letting him pull out my chair as I sat. We ordered simple dishes, letting the conversation drift through soft laughter and quiet moments. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about revenge or loss or betrayal. I was thinking about now. About the warmth in Colin's eyes when he listened. About the way the world felt when I wasn't bracing for a fight. About the quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be about something other than survival. When the check came, Colin reached for it, but I placed my hand over his steady warm. My treat, I said, letting a smile slip free. He chuckled, leaning back. You really can't stop being in control, can you? Not yet, I said, meeting his gaze, letting the honesty show. But I'm learning. We stepped out into the crisp night air, the city alive with the hum of traffic and distant music. Colin walked beside me, close enough that our arms brushed with each step. At the corner, we paused, the glow of the streetlight washing over us, painting everything in soft gold. What's next for you? He asked, his breath visible in the cold. I looked up at the sky, letting the air fill my lungs before I exhaled, slow, steady. I build, I said. I live. And I don't let what happened define me. He nodded, reaching out, brushing a strand of hair back from my face, his touch light. That's the Ava I know, he said. I let out a soft laugh, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the wind carry away the last weight of what had been. I didn't forgive everything, but I forgave enough to be free. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments.